Well, welcome back to Celebrate Good Lives, and we have a special guest in the studio today. Welcome to my comrade and good friend Dean Weber and
Morning.
Jordan Goss. Welcome into the studio.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So Jordan is, well, let him tell us a bit about who he is, but currently a funeral director in the or manager in the Waikato, but also the president of the New Zealand Embalmers Association, and that's sort of why he's here today as well, to talk a little bit about embalming, but also to give us his thoughts on the funeral industry and what's happening. So welcome in, Jordan, and tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
So I started in the funeral industry in Wellington in 2009. I was given a great opportunity to work for a large company down there. Qualified as a embalmer in 2012, then as a funeral director in 2015. And the rest is history, really.
Right. And so you worked at a big funeral home in Wellington, and then you sort of did a little stint in a little town as well called Waipukaro.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that again actually was a really great opportunity because it means I've worked in really large companies and really small companies. And
you've got a good perspective on the whole industry, right? Because when you come from a funeral home like Harbour City in Wellington, which is a large firm doing a significant amount of funerals, and then going to Waipukaro, which is obviously how many funerals would you be looking at there? Between 100 and...
Yeah, probably between 80 and 120.
Yeah, so you get a whole new perspective, because I've sort of been in this situation as well, and Dean, you have as well, is that, I went from doing sort of 350 to 500, then I went back to 200, then I came here and we're doing 130. And when we first started, you get a really good broad perspective on the whole industry, because you don't just embalm, at the big firms, you just embalm or you just funeral direct. You go to Waipukaro or you go to Whakatane and you have got to do everything.
Mow the lawns, wash the cars.
Wash the cars. So there's a whole different perspective on the funeral industry. And do you think that has potentially shaped your... where you are today? Obviously, you're now at a startup firm. Not a startup firm, but a startup branch.
Yes. Do
you think that's given you the broad spectrum on the industry and how it shaped you as a funeral director and embalmer?
Yeah, it's I guess if we talk about busy is different in both of those environments. Busy for a person in a small firm means you're going to have some long days and probably feel the stress a little bit different. If you're a busy embalmer in a big company, then generally people are just bringing in the cases to you, and you're just solidly working in the mortuary for that whole period of time. Whereas, going back to that small environment, you're going out and doing transfers and doing police jobs, and because it's rural, you're also driving.
A significant amount of driving,
you learn... particularly in environments like that, to make phone calls while you're on the road. So you're you do your funeral arrangement, and then you're trying to make all of your bookings while you're on the road driving back to the office. So
time management, right? Managing your time as an embalmer in a big mortuary doesn't become as significant as managing your time when it comes to working in a small firm. And I mean, like you've worked in big firms and small firms with multiple branches. How do you feel? How do you see it?
We've talked about it, but we've not hit on some of the same points that you just did. And you're absolutely right. Being busy at a small firm is way heavier taxing on one individual to get everything done for the show to go forward than it is on a team of people to get your job done.
Because in a small firm, right, a lot of the time you go and meet the family, you do the transfer potentially from the house, you make the arrangements, you go back to the office and do the embalm. So you're really, everything. You really need to manage your time correctly in order to make those things happen.
A lot of the experience that we've all had sort of presents us with a unique set, and you and I were just talking about this in the car, a unique set of well-rounded skills that let you do everything within the scope of the funeral service. Brad and I have talked about ourselves. Do you have a preferred placement within the funeral home? Like, where do you prefer to be? Do you prefer to be in the front, in making arrangements, seeing families, doing funerals? Do you prefer to be office management, development, growth, strategy, marketing, or do you prefer back?
I guess in a situation like that, probably be in operations. When we were talking in the car, as I said, I really like the analysis of certain things, and so probably in operations, where in a bigger company is where I would like to be in a situation like that, because then you're sitting back, you're looking, okay, how can we be the most efficient that we can, and while I've never held that role, it's something I'd be pretty keen on at some point.
As my career sort of churned through, and I think I've been involved a little bit longer than the both of you, maybe as much as you two combined. I found mine changed quite a bit. When I started, I was happy to be in the prep room, happy to be out of the way, happy to be in a position to make the least amount of mistakes that are noticeable. And then gradually came out to the public in willingness to put myself forward, to be the face and to be the responsible party. And now a bit further into my career, I really enjoy the same as what you're saying, the bit of the strategy, the efficiency, and encouraging other people who are new into it to see them have fun with it.
And it's one of these things. I guess there are some days, I often talk to people about how much, when it's busy, I like doing a Pacific Island funeral, because that's an all-day event. And then what's going on back at work is not your concern.
I knew exactly where you were going.
It's interesting. Oh, well, thanks for joining us anyway, Jordan, and it's cool to be with you. Just having a few mic problems over here, FYI. I don't know what's happened, but anyway. So we're going to be talking about embalming today, and we're going to split this into obviously multiple different elements, because there's so much to embalming. But in your role as the president of the New Zealand Embalmers Association, and congratulations on your appointment there.
Thank you.
Not that long ago, but been on the... a year?
18 months.
18 months,
So how much of the term is left?
Well, they're 1 year terms, so I'm in my second.
Good for you.
Yeah, really, in terms of next year, really just depends on where I'm at with the new business. So,
and you're leading a great association. You're leading a great bunch of people. The Embalmers Association has been leading the way for New Zealand embalmers for a long time, so congratulations on continuing that. As the president of the New Zealand Embalmers Association, I guess we wanted to talk to you about embalming, obviously, and we wanted to talk about embalming and specifics, but we're going to talk about, we've obviously got some props here and we'll go through those at some point, but when we talk about the start of the embalm, or the pre-embalm, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? So when we've brought the deceased into the mortuary, what's the first stage?
So I think from my standpoint, what I look at when I initially am in receipt of someone or a death call, my experience was I was usually the one making the transfer. So first of all, my eyes are on the deceased. What's happened? Is it violent? Is it natural? What's the case analysis? What are my eyes telling me what are my senses telling me? My eyes, my nose, my hands. What is it telling me about what I'm going to receive before I ever get a chance to look at a piece of paper with a medical explanation on it? Because sometimes they just didn't come.
I'd probably even go one step back from there and identity, and actually checking the identity of the deceased. And this it kind of comes up later on, particularly if a family's dressing and they're wanting to talk to remove the ID tag off them, and that's partly. What I like to say is, you know your mum or dad, but not everybody in our funeral home does, and that's why identification's important. But then you're right. Moving on to case analysis, looking at what we can see, the environment when we've done the transfer, knowing are they going home, how long for, and all of these sorts of things. So you're absolutely right, and forming a picture.
Yeah, and I think making a good case analysis and taking all the appropriate actions from those conversations, environment, when the funeral is going to be, how long the deceased needs to be around for, where are they going, all of these things mixed in with the cause of death certificate. So the cause of death certificate gives you an understanding of how the person died, which is then going to give you a better understanding of how the embalming is going to go. Would that be a fair assessment?
Having a clear back picture of what happened and having a clear picture of what the expectation is moving forward lets you put the middle together.
And so then once you've got all those pieces of information ready to go, you've made an analysis, you've done a case analysis of the deceased in the mortuary. Would that be your next step? Once you get them back into the mortuary, undress, figure out what's going to happen here, what you need to be looking out for? Yeah,
so you're kind of working through your disinfection process as you're doing unwrapping, undressing the deceased. And when I was taught, we used to always write up on the whiteboard. And I think particularly for new embalmers, that's a really good practice to be in. Probably as you get a little bit older, you just start taking snapshots in your head of what's going on there.
But as a new embalmer, that's an important step.
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably nothing more important than case analysis, because if you're taught to do something one way, and we always use this vessel and that and you're just defaulting to something that's possibly not going to work for the case in front of you. So
that's important. Yeah, and I think what we sort of, I guess as time goes by and we embalm, multiple years, like all of us have, you tend to get. Don't start laughing, Dean Weber. You start to get really used to those different analysis, right? And you start to see the same things, and you start to know what's required for each deceased. But every time you do an embalming, it's a different case. It's a different analysis. You have different things you have to take into consideration.
And sometimes you can feel a little bit wishy-washy if you're talking to a family about it, but every case really is different. And Dean and I were talking just before about sometimes you're questioning yourself about whether or not you should or shouldn't do something. And if you're questioning, then the answer is yes, you should be doing it. So that can take longer. And so to never really, it's all great to say, it's going to take me an hour and a half. But when you start asking yourself that question and you have to do other things, then...
When you start wondering have I done enough, or shouldn't I? If you're already questioning it, then I do remember back in the day when I was referred to my Bible, which my binder is coming off. Do you guys recall as to why the purpose of why we embalm? The three words
to prepare,
to disinfect, preserve, and restore. And I think a lot of time
I'm sure it was the 3 Ps when I started.
I said, wow, see, different Bible.
So it's preparation, presentation, and sanitation.
PPS maybe it was. Maybe I missed the last one. It's been a while maybe.
I think a lot of people, when they come in, a lot of families sort of ask, is embalming required, or why do you do it? When you do these public speaking events that we've done, why do we have to do it? And it's like, well, we don't have to, but we do it, to make a safe environment, to protect everyone who's wanting to spend time, to give us time, and then for the result is always.
And I think that comes through the transparency with families as well. I think we've talked about this before, but this industry has been so untransparent over the years, and for us now to be having upfront, honest conversations about embalming, because people actually want to know. People actually want to know what's going to be happening to mum, and when you tell them. And you explain it to them in the right way with the correct analysis of what an embalm actually is and what it achieves and what it does for people, then there is those aspects are super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if you don't mind me interrupting there, I really love when you're talking with a family and they have said, or they've told the person who took the first call they didn't want embalming. I actually like to ask why.
Yeah.
Because I believe in a lot of cases it's a lack of education.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
most times.
Yeah. And it's that whole if we're not viewing, do we have to embalm? And it's kind of like, well, it gives you options, and it's the gold standard in preparation. So you're setting them up. You're sending your
I just person. Steal that one. From the gold standard in preparation.
So you're sending your person off, your family member in the best possible way you could. And it's like, I guess if you think about it, so you've got an unembalmed body at a funeral and they're in the casket and it all looks great, but we know that not every single box in terms of the gold standard has been ticked. And
well, and it comes down to the other one we get a lot is, she's only going to be around for a day or so do we have to embalm, or we don't need embalming because she's only going to be here, we're only going to have her for 2 days, and then and it's like well, it's all about the way you deliver it and the way that it's educated. And the other one that comes up all the time is the chemical aspect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I raised this recently actually with a travelling, what would you call them? Travelling embalmer, someone that does seminars or sales rep. And it's that whole, you could just, what we call in the mortuary, pre-injection. So you could just do a pre-injection and you would be better off. Not necessarily the gold standard, but in doing a pre-injection, you would be maybe 1 or 2 days better off than what you would be if you just did nothing. And it was... Point. Yeah, and it was really interesting, kind of having that conversation, because this particular rep, one of the big things that they do is pre-injection in every case. So,
sounds very American.
Yeah.
He was.
There you go. What a surprise. So let's get back to where we were. So obviously we've started the disinfection process and we've disinfected the deceased. What's the next thing we're looking to do?
I guess on my end, and I've been speaking with a newer embalmer about this recently, and it's looking at your case and probably prioritising your conditions. So prioritising what's most important. So let's just say you've got edema here, dehydration there. You've got some pretty sad looking legs. So it's actually looking through those things and deciding what is going to cause me the most grief based on what I know about when the funeral is going to be or where the person's going, all of that sort of stuff. So before you kind of actually commit yourself to your site of injection is deciding, making really smart decisions about where that's going to be.
Right, because that's super important, right? Because I was just about to go there, and the fact of we have someone
differences.
So someone like myself, I will, and this should not be taken as gospel, but I will always start in the femoral.
Yes.
Regardless.
I was going to say,
and there's reasons for why I always start in the femoral, and my main reason is, or there's one or two. First one is I always start in the femoral because I want to try my luck out of the femoral and see if I can get good distribution up through the top, and then I don't have to make any incisions around the neck that are going to be visible to the family. That's one reason. The second reason is I've always found that the distribution out of the femoral up has always been far better and more even through the face than anywhere else. You do run into more trouble in the fact that you can sometimes not get good drainage. And you can also run into the problem of missing certain areas as far as, you might not get it down an arm or something like that. So that was my reasoning behind always starting with a femoral. But I know you have different feelings. I'd love to hear yours.
No, what I was going to say is it's going to be interesting to people that are listening and watching is that when you ask these questions and then which one of us is answering is I think we're going to find that where everybody's got their own way and their own path and their own scenarios. And it's going to be interesting to sort of feel those
Certainly
out.
Don't take my word as gospel for my 3 embalms a year. So
for me, I always try to take as long as I can to make my decision, to think about all of the complexities of exactly what you're talking about, try to catch myself out in what I have planned and see if that still is right. So I try to set all my features, but I'm usually not pressed for time. I'm not doing 6 people a day, and I'm not having to worry about the clock ticking over.
What do you mean by setting features?
So I usually go through the process of disinfecting the facial features of your eyes and your mouth, and then going through the process of setting the eyes closed and then closing the mouth, get my picture of what I'm going to look at, what I've got presented, get that ready. Okay, I'm happy. I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to...
Because that would be classed as correct technique.
Oh, yeah. I guess the point that I was making before, let's just, in this hypothetical scenario, I have not incised anything at this point. I'm just making decisions in my head. And
sorry, I jumped the gun.
Yeah, a little bit excited there.
What a surprise.
So Dean, Dean's right, and I would be doing the features first, and particularly the most important thing would be shaving at that point, because if you're asked to shave afterwards, it can all go bad.
You know what I found with that, and this is what one thing I was surprised with when I came from the States and then came over to New Zealand, and no one wanted to believe me or even try it. We used to shave people, or sometimes not, in the States, and then we'd always top everybody off before we put them in the casket with an electric razor.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and boy, everybody thought I was nuts when I came over here, and they're like, "No, you'll burn them. It's like, nah.
Not with an electric razor.
Yeah, no.
Really?
Yeah. Well, no, you won't burn them. We used to do it all the time.
Why would you?
Yeah.
But why would you shave them a second time? Does hair grow? Does it?
Well, that was going to be a question I was going to pose to you later. Sometimes you're just not that great when you've done it the first time, or I don't know. Sometimes you've missed a bit there, or I haven't done it for either you've been on holiday and you missed a bit here or there.
It is really interesting, isn't it? The sometimes when a person comes into the mortuary and they have had a shave that day. What a poor job they could have done.
From the nursing home.
Or the deceased himself. They start to look like Brad currently.
Oh, look at you.
The old neck beard.
Because you had one this morning.
Or once a week if I'm lucky.
And so what I kind of, there are correct techniques for embalmers. Okay, there are correct techniques on things that you should do at particular times, right? But that doesn't always make sense for people once you've done your qualification, potentially. Everyone has their own technique of doing things, and that's where I'm going at. I'm not saying that anyone's wrong or right. I'm not saying my femoral injection, first and foremost, is wrong or right.
No, that's right. Right. Well, we were talking about as mentors over the years. When we've taken people on, we both sort of have the same philosophy about it: is prop you up, get you safe and set. And then
you make your own decisions.
I'm going to leave. If you need to think on your feet here.
Yeah, you do what feels right. What feels right for you.
For you, and design your own way.
And be confident in your decisions as well. There's nothing kind of wrong with going for a femoral every single time. There's plenty of people that out there that do that.
Again, that was how I was taught.
Yeah.
Or not taught, but you learn off people who you watch, right?
Yeah.
And I watched a particular embalmer for 2 years.
Yeah.
Started at the femoral.
Yeah.
Every single time a coconut.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I'll just do that too, and then you'd see the results, and you might get on a run of 1 in 5 was a winner, and you've got to go up there anyway. Okay, it happens. I've seen a lot of embalmers. I used to work with a guy who would RCI everybody.
Oh yeah.
Everybody got the RCI treatment, and for those that don't know, an RCI is both carotids, left and right, because you get even distribution to the face. And down both sides.
Oh, do you though?
Well, you don't because sometimes you don't, and that's what I like about the femoral injection.
Yeah.
You just got to hope for no blockages. But So yeah, I guess that's sort of where we were at, and like you said, there's no right or wrong.
Yep.
I think another technique, and I went through a phase in my younger years as an embalmer of doing a split injection for every case, and so that's injecting through the femoral and draining from the jugular.
From the jugular.
Yeah. And actually that's really good as well, because for all the reasons that you say, Brad, but also takes out the
drainage
negative
problem.
The drainage negative, and then you're kind of also open, so you've got the opportunity as well if you need to open the carotid artery. So
is there anything else you would do before you started an embalm, Dean Webber?
Anything else I would do,
or anything that the listeners or the people watching would find interesting before you started? Because we could talk all day about what you do, how you would do an embalm step by step. We're not talking step by step. We're just talking about the important facts.
Yeah. So as I've set the features and got the deceased looking the way that I'm happy with them, looking comfortable and relaxed and not stressed and discontorted in their facial features. I've made my decision as to where I'm going to raise vessels from. And while in that process of raising vessels, I'm thinking now, while I'm doing as you've done this a lot, you don't have to think when you're raising vessels after a while. You can think about other things while your eyes are just watching. I start thinking about my mix, and I keep my next thing off. I put it off, my next step off, as long as I can until I'm absolutely ready in case I want to change my mind. And then I think about...
So you're very sequential.
I like to do one thing at a time. If I have too many things going on at one time, I have to complete, and this is just me, I have to complete the thing that I'm doing first before I move on to the next one. I don't like...
So you're
having half things going.
It's probably a male thing as well.
Because we can't multitask.
But what we do a great job of.
Of course.
And I take a lot of pride in what I do, that I've got one chance, one opportunity to get it right, and I don't want to be the one responsible for messing up somebody's experience that I can't undo.
You get one go at it.
So I try to take as long as I can until I'm got my vessels tied off and I'm ready to go. Now I move to the tank, and then I go to the tank and talk about fluids.
One little analogy I like to use in funeral services: you can get married multiple times over, but you can only do a funeral once. And so that's why committing 110% in all instances is important.
Well, you only get one go at it.
And I don't want to be the one responsible or being held in memory of going, that guy messed it up, and I don't want that. So,
anything further to add to that before we get to the tank?
Yeah, I think on my end, sometimes we can be guilty of preempting what we're going to use, and you kind of, as you go, you never, I am not in the habit of mixing something up before I receive the deceased, because that's pretty poor practice, but you kind of, sometimes you check yourself, you go back and you're like, man, if I'd mixed that up, what I thought I was
going to use.
And what I thought I was receiving, I would have been so wrong. And that just proves the point, doesn't it? And don't ever preempt.
And you can really get caught sometimes when you're younger and you got a social life and you're like, shit, I want to get this done. Are they coming? And you try to get as many things ahead done as you can. And it's like, it didn't work out.
And then you get a 4:00 p.m.
Well, Dean and I were talking about earlier, when you have multiple cases a day. So let's just say the norm might be that you do 3 or 4, and then you get 6 that you need to embalm. So by about case number 3, you're getting really good, because and I was always in practice of cleaning my instruments and cleaning everything down in between each case, which I would hope everybody else would do as well. But you just become so much more efficient, and so people are like, when they're like, oh, I've got this many cases to do, it's like, hey, actually, it's it'll get better. You know, by about number 3, you're going to be.
Yeah. By the time you knock number 5 off, you're going to be ready to go home.
Ready for a beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, that covers off the first part of what we do with embalming. So, we'll come back for part 2 soon. Cool. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Awesome.